Hello, everyone, and welcome to Campaign School, the next episode. My name is Leanne Caron. I am currently a sitting city councillor in the city of Guelph, representing Ward 5, and I'm really excited to be the host of this episode. And I'm joined here today by Kathy Downer, and the focus of this video is to talk about a real-life, on-the-ground campaign experience, what it's like to be a candidate, lessons learned, and some of the pitfalls to follow. But first, I would like to start our session with a land acknowledgement. Land acknowledgements are an important part of public service. It's an important part of us as Canadians, as settlers, to fully understand the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations and our place in Canada's history. And the city of Guelph is located within the Dish with One Spoon territory. That's Treaty 3 territory on the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And the Dish with One Spoon is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples and their allied nations. And it's an agreement to live peacefully on the land throughout what is now known as the Great Lakes region. We all share resources and everything the Creator has provided for us upon our arrival on Mother Earth. And we recognize that before we were here, this was a gathering place where we work and learn, and it's home to many past, present, and future First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And our acknowledgement of the land today is our declaration of our collective responsibility to this place and its people's history, rights, and presence. So I'm going to start by introducing Kathy Downer. Actually, I'm going to let Kathy introduce herself, and then we're going to get right into the meat of our session today. Kathy?
Thanks, Leanne, and thanks for inviting me here today to the organizers of the campaign school. I think it's a really important in democracy to see more women elected to council. So I'm Kathy Downer, and I'm a Ward 5 city councillor along with Leanne. And Ward 5 encompasses the university, so it starts at Waterloo and goes all the way to Courtright, basically, and east and west as well. So I've been on council since, I started in 1994. So I have had about 20 years, but I had an 8-year break where I decided, I think it was in 2006, I decided not to run at that time. Had a number of things that I needed to deal with. My parents were getting older and family issues. So I needed to take a break. And at that time, I didn't think I was coming back, but I did. I felt the calling to come back in 2014 and have been on council since that time in Ward 5, and have sat on a lot of city committees and been very active in the community otherwise as well.
Yeah. So Kathy, everyone takes a different path into a city council or making that huge decision to run for elected office. What inspired you to run for office in the first place many years ago?
It was a number of things, but I became, a number of years before, I had become very active in the community. There had been, of course, a planning application that seems to launch a lot of people's career that I became very active in. And then I joined my neighborhood association, was appointed to the city's planning advisory committee. So was already very active in the community. And then there was, the city changed to wards, and in that second time of the ward elections, a prominent councillor was going to step down, Carl Hamilton, who was a lovely man. And there was a lot of encouragement for me to run, and I was so reluctant at first. I must say it took 6 months for particularly this one person to convince me to throw my hat in the ring. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of women, not really feeling the confidence that they could do it. But I mean, ultimately it was, the grassroots community work that sort of inspired me to run and to continue that, and sort of to be in that position of more influence in a decision making. So I had a passion for public service to begin with, and it is sort of part of my second nature to me. And so that sort of is what I think ultimately inspired me, was the community work that I had been doing, and and a way to continue that and influence it in a different way.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I'm sure campaigns, the process of campaigning has changed a lot. And since we're going to focus here today on that real life experience, can you walk us through some of the differences from your first campaign to your 2018 campaign? And what are some of the things you learned along the way?
So in my first campaign, I was very lucky in that the person who finally convinced me to run had been a campaign manager. He'd been a campaign manager in a number of provincial and some municipal elections. And so because I didn't know anything about how to do that. I was really naive. And so he became my campaign manager, and it was really important. He pushed me to do things like, to make a press release when I announced, and other people weren't doing that, but it was more that he upped the level, upped the ante on push me to do things way out of my comfort zone. He kept saying, Kathy, you got to see yourself as a commodity. Don't worry about it. And so that was good. And so it was a lot more. It was very organized, and he had people phoning, and they get out the vote on election day. Those types of things. We can talk a bit more about that. But it was with a real campaign manager and a real campaign with. So it was more operational, I think, at that time. And over time, I became my own campaign manager the more I, knew and was comfortable, because it used to be 3-year terms. So I did 4 campaigns before I came back. And it was, you're right. I think it did always seem a little more operational then than it has the last 2 times that I've run, where you really start looking more at the messaging, right? So it becomes more of a value-based campaign versus an issue-based campaign. And I think I intuitively did that before. I didn't take on issues. I took on, this is my approach to issues. This is what I value around that issue, rather than running on a specific issue themselves, because those issues change. And Leanne, you and I know that what we think we know about an issue going into it really evolves, and the more information you get, it can change, and you could be changing your vote on a certain issue. So you got to be very careful about making commitments around issues like, I'll get you an East End grocery store. Those types of things are problematic, because you don't have control over those. So you really have to do a value. This is how I work towards getting that, is sort of more what you want to do. And this is what I value about that, is what you want to look at. So I noticed that. And then in the first campaign, you're looking at, it just seems so simple then, right? Flyers and door knocking. And now, and at that time, the campaign manager was probably one of your most important people in the campaign. But now it's changed to digital, right? A lot more. The website is very important. Your messaging and is very important. And your IT, your list of people that you can call upon to support you, and growing that list. And it's just a lot more different that way. And the number of questionnaires you get, you really need to be prepared for the extensive number of questionnaires from the different interest groups, the Guelph Urban Forest Friends, all the newspapers, the university, the neighborhood groups. They all want responses. And so that can take a lot of time up. And so now you spend a lot of time leading up to your campaign, which is basically September and October, preparing your messaging and what you think about certain issues, having your website ready. Those are all very different from what it was in the beginning.
Yeah. And you talked a lot about depending on your, what we call social capital. So your professional and your social and your neighborhood networks. What kind of networks did you tap into for that kind of grassroots community support?
Well, definitely the neighborhood groups, because I had been very active. I had been the treasurer of the neighborhood group here. And so I really tapped into my immediate neighborhood where, and then sort of out from there, because that was where my core support would be, was in the old university neighborhood. And then, but there's other social, other organizations that I was involved in. I was involved in the Suzuki School in Guelph and the Youth Music Center, and other people in the city who were interested in planning. So you sort of expanded out from there. And it's really important to meet with key community leaders. And I've done that before every election. Not just formal community leaders like people in charge of, nonprofits and things like that, but people who are, show up frequently at council or leaders in your neighborhood groups. It's really important to connect with them before you run, and sit down and chat with them and find out what they're thinking about municipal politics. So how, those questions, how's the city doing? Where has it fallen down for you personally or your organization? And where do you think it needs to go? And that helps you to form your message, or where you think you want to focus in the next term as well. So yeah, you want to really connect into that. And then some of them, become your advisors during the campaign as well.
So let's get to the meat of a campaign. You talked a little bit about how the ground game, the knocking on doors, is important. But who are the people that you need in your campaign? You talked about having a campaign manager. Is that an absolute necessity for a first-time candidate? And even if not a campaign manager, what are the other key positions that you need? I know you've always had a sign coordinator, but what other key positions are essential to getting a campaign team together?
Yeah, so I think, like as I said, the first time I had a real campaign manager, and subsequently not really. I became my own campaign manager, but had key volunteers. And certainly my IT people and the people who built my website and managed, that work have been very key the last 2 elections, and having them keep my list current and keeping my website current as well. So that's a very important position. Your sign, my husband has always been my sign guy. So he would always call out, from a list from the previous election, to people who had signs before, and see if they were willing to take a sign again. And then my IT people have made a great, program to keep that updated as well. People you can also sort of communication sort of advisory people that will help you with your messaging. So you can, bounce ideas off of, like, what does this sound like? What do you think about this as well? So that's really important as well. And somebody who you can send your, responses to for editing, or, you've written it way too long. I got to condense this to 500 words. How do I do this? And that's very helpful as well. But volunteers who will, take your sign, deliver brochures. It's all important, like the brochure delivery. It's great to have people from neighborhoods themselves that are living in neighborhoods to deliver those brochures. But there's a lot of people that you need to organize. Coffee chats are a great thing as well, having volunteers during that. But it's all sort of organizing that beforehand. So all the things that you need. And I think the campaign school is going to, in 2018, I did a campaign plan workshop. And I think those slides are going to go up, but there's a number of components that you need to look at when you plan. And doing a lot of that work beforehand is really important. So long before the debates, I have an issue page where I think of these are what the issues are, and this is how my response is going to be to that. So, I might have 20 issues that could come up in the campaign, and I've already got my messaging out around those so that there is no surprises during the debates or the campaigns. I sort of already thought about those issues. You're not taken by surprise. But prep is everything, right? It's that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. that's something to remember, right? It's really important to do a lot of planning before that September and October as much as you can, because you're going to be in the thick of it then, and you're going to be very busy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because a lot of people think that the campaign is the on the ground stuff, how many hours you might be in a debate or how many hours you need to put aside to knock on doors and deliver flyers. But the prep time is a huge part of that. And so how much time should a candidate dedicate to running a campaign? And kind of the timelines. I mean, the times have changed in that we can't declare until May. And then it's the summer. So then there's fundraising and there's the prep time. But how much time from May to October 24th should a potential candidate expect to put into a campaign?
Quite a bit. Like I think in September and October, it's pretty well full time. Before that, you might put in 20 hours a week, there's a lot of research to be done, particularly if you haven't run before. Like, when you're on council, the issues, you have the reports, where to find them. And you have more access to staff, which is unfortunately, and a lot of candidates that aren't on council wouldn't even think to call up the appropriate staff to help to talk to it about, but you can. I mean, they're available to the public to talk to about issues. So I think it's like that prep work should start long before you even declare, to get all the information. But certainly once you're into, and the operational, like your signs, what's your colors going to be, what is the design going to be, you want that organized before Labor Day, because that's the day that signs usually go up after that. Or what's your brochure going to look like, what it's going to say, all that needs to be ready before then. So it's significant in August and July, the amount of time. In September and October, you're actually doing the work. You're showing up at debates, you're showing up at doors, you're showing up at coffee chats, you're responding to questionnaires at that time, and any spare time you have, like I said, you're what neighborhoods you've targeted to go door to door. And so it's pretty intense in those 2 months. But before how well you do in those 2 months depends on how well you prepped before in the June, July, and August, and the research that you've done during that time.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a real balance of pre-work and then hitting the ground.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is, as we all know, is that that's not just volunteer work. There are costs to running for office, everything from signs to brochures and a lot of other expenses. So can you talk a little bit about the fundraising, how much you needed to raise to run a successful campaign, and give us some context between the first campaign and the last campaign, because things have changed.
Yeah, they really have. So the first campaign, I think I spent a few $1,000s, and so the last campaign, I think it was closer to 7,000. And, while Mayoral campaigns do a lot of big fundraising, and, they've got this, paid campaign managers and fundraisers, it's different on a ward level. So I put out fundraising letters. You have a spot on your website if you want to donate. But it's other than getting a few $1,000s in donations, usually a lot of ward candidates are spending a lot of their own money to run for council, and that has been my situation as well. So, I probably should be more direct in asking for funds or doing more of that, but there's
because your networks are your friends and your colleagues, so it is an awkward ask, isn't it?
It is. It really is. And I've been lucky. I have gotten some good donations. But again, it's hard to focus on because you're really busy in that September and October. And some, there's some that do really well at fundraising for their own campaigns, but it's you send out that ask, you send out an email specific to asking for fundraising. So, campaigns cost money. And if you want good people elected, if you want to get a broad spectrum, I mean, what I've said just now about, well, I used to use a lot of my own money. Well, that's not accessible for a lot of people. And so if you want a diverse council, and if you want council to look like the community, then you need to support those councils and those campaigns financially. I will say that. That's really important.
Yeah, that's a good point, because not all of those who are watching today are necessarily candidates, but also those who want to support candidates. Mm-hmm. And that's a good message. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about the campaign on the ground, because it's not all, kissing babies and shaking hands. There's opposition out there, and there's awkward moments. There's anxiety about debates and being on stage, and those are real. I think deterrents for a lot of people to put themselves out there publicly, because putting yourself out there publicly also means that there's the potential that you'll be attacked, insulted. It's not all pleasant. Can you talk a little bit about how you handle that and the scrutiny on your family? I know for myself, my kids were young, and their names were on the sign, and they were harassed at school. Hey, is that your mom? So it's not just you running in a campaign. It's your family and anyone with your name and anyone associated with you. And it's, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the reality of that experience.
Well, you're right. And I think that was part of the initial fear, right? You're really putting yourself out there. You're exposing yourself, and you're exposing your family. I mean, as you said, your kid, my youngest was 4 when I first ran. I had 3 kids under 14 when I first ran. So you're really exposing them as well. Fortunately, they were not sort of impacted too much during the campaign, and I'm very lucky about that. So my husband has gotten into a few heated conversations, but I think you do. There's negativity out there, and it's worse now with social media, right? If you look at, so you can put out a press release to run, and the press is gonna they'll put it out there, and then underneath in the comments section, like, you can get all kinds of, oh no, we should get rid of her, and that type of thing, right? So you're going to see a lot of that negativity, and it's really important not to take it too personally.
Mm-hmm. And trolls, like, that's a new thing that we didn't have to deal with many years ago, and so there's constant baiting, and I'm not a good example, because I often take the bait and get defensive, and becoming defensive is not a good campaign strategy. So can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so that is it. You can't become hooked into it, and sometimes there's certain Facebook pages that you should just stay away from. Just focus on, be yourself, be authentic, but focus on your campaign. Don't lose your message. Don't get roped into the side games that very few people are going to see. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to your mental health or your physical well-being to get hooked into that. You need to just run a campaign where you stay fairly positive, that you stay on message, and that you don't get dragged into, because even in a debate, you could have another candidate suddenly like go after you, or pull something out, or say something, or make a quote from you out of context from a number of years ago. So you got to keep your cool. You got to try to be very calm about it, even when you're not. I mean, just stay focused on getting your voice out there, because those types of things are meant to shock you and shut you down, and you don't want them to succeed at that. So it's a really important, and that's important during the campaign too, is self-care, because you can't prepare yourself for that unless you're looking after yourself, unless you're taking that time to breathe or take a walk in the forest every couple of days in order to center yourself. It's really important to stay grounded, and finding ways to stay grounded, having a plan to stay grounded during the campaign is as important as the operations themselves, because it's pretty easy to become ungrounded, and that's happened to me before, and I haven't been happy and proud about those moments, right? So it's really important to stay as grounded as you can during a campaign, because it can get hot. So we've been lucky in Ward 5. It's never been a really not, we haven't had too many really nasty campaigns. Maybe at the beginning, I think I had a few, but certainly at the higher levels, mayoral campaigns can get really, really heated. And you can get drawn into that as well, into other people's campaigns, and you can see what's going on elsewhere, and that can really get under your skin as well. So it's really important to stay on message and stay focused, and that's around prep work and self-care as well. It's really
that is really great advice, because it does take its toll. And I think that's what keeps people from wanting to run, is that there is an real anxiety level about debates and negativity, and being in the community and putting yourself forward. And that's real. That's not a perception.
I think that's, one of the reasons too that we don't see as much diversity at council. In the last election, we saw examples of racism around signs for people with different ethnic backgrounds who were running. It was really disappointing, but there is a dark side to our society that thinks nothing of doing that kind of damage to people and their signs and their property, and trying to it's very disappointing, but it happens.
And we see it at the provincial and the federal level, and not that it's any more appropriate there, but we've seen it for decades at that level. We don't expect it in the local level, because we're all neighbors. We all live in Guelph, and we know the people that we're knocking on the doors of. So yeah, it's something that you have to be aware of as you're launching a campaign, that could happen. You could have people who don't agree with your position, and they may be your neighbors, and prepare for that. Because this campaign school is, and we probably have viewers who are both men and women, but we've seen just even in the last couple of days in global politics, very strong female leaders, and we've seen misogyny and attacks on female leaders. And certainly Canada and Ontario, we're not immune to that. We've seen some pretty nasty campaigns where women leaders have been attacked for their gender. And I wonder if you could, as we're wrapping up, talk specifically about being a woman in politics, and offer some encouragement to women who are watching, who might be thinking about running for the first time.
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's so it is different for men than women. And back when I first ran, I'll say back when, in 1994. The male candidates, and the councillors, they could just show up for meetings. They didn't have to worry about their kids or cooking meals, or, and so it was different than it was, so when I think about that, I think we've come a long way. It's in that way. There's more of an equal footing for women coming onto council or running in that way. But my main thing is to be as authentic and true to your values as you can be, and not to get hooked in by the negativity, and to, as I said before, stay centered. I think we just need to keep putting our voices out there as women and making sure we're heard. And that's what's really important. And, it's, and staying true to yourself. Try not to be somebody else. Your important job is to be yourself. And however that is, and have your voice heard. It's really important for more women. We're not doing as well as we used to. in Guelph for women and diversity on council. Actually, diversity is
just statistically. I mean, we're not at the 50% mark, and
no.
And nationally, or locally.
Yeah, it's about staying focused and keeping the noise out, right? It's not easy to do, but self-care is a big part of that during the campaign.
And our daughters and their friends are all watching. So there's a real personal responsibility for women in leadership to set that example.
Yeah, and I think, surround yourself with other powerful women. Like Leanne and I have been great supports for each other through the years, but other women who, make sure you've got a good circle of women around you who can rally for you, and men too. There's a lot of men that'll play that role. Certainly my husband's been a big supporter of supporting me going out there.
And you see that space. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, he's been quite happy for me to follow whatever I wanted to do, and being true to that. So I think, you need those supports around you, and make sure you've got that, and that you can go to them when you're feeling down and discouraged, or things happen, because they do, that you've got them there to talk to and to support you, and to encourage you to keep going. That's what I would do. I just jump in, do it. I mean, you're going to be out of your comfort zone. I'll tell you that. You'll be really out of your comfort zone. But really, if you're thinking about it, like, just jump in and do it.
Yeah, stronger for it. Thank you. We're wrapping up. Are there any final words of wisdom or campaign experiences that you would like to share that might be valuable for potential candidates? And as I said, for supporters of candidates who might be watching as well.
No, I think that covers it. I think for me, I think we've covered off a lot. It's just do it, and I'm happy to talk to anybody. My phone number, you can reach me, you'll find it. I'm happy to talk to any potential candidates who are actually female or male, who are interested in putting in their name to run. I think it's important, and I think it's very rewarding. The work itself is very rewarding, and over the years, it's great to be part of that, to be part of council. It's a good job. Like it is a lovely job. You're serving the public. You're engaged with the community. You're surrounded by your community all the time. So I just would really, I don't want to make it sound like it is a tough job, but it also comes with many rewards as well. And it certainly has me over the years. I've been really rewarded in the work that I do, and have had great feedback as well. So I just encourage you to go for it, and I'm there to cheer you on.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. And as someone who certainly mentored me through the years, I know the importance of having strong leaders around you. And I just want to thank you again for joining us in this Municipal Campaign School episode. As the senior stateswoman of council, you have a lot of wisdom and experience that is unique in our community. And so coming here today to share it with all of us, we're incredibly thankful. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Leanne.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.